shave off, you're making a public exhibition of yourself.
Oh, why won't you dance with me, Arthur?
Because the music stopped 5 minutes ago. Now get off.
Hello, Arthur, mate. Enjoying yourself?
What has got into that sister of yours? She's all hot and excited.
Well, if she's hot and excited, it ain't you.
Arthur, say you love me.
Will you get... What have you been drinking? She must have had more than a small port and lemon.
She can't have done. You've been buying them.
Look, will you sit down and stop making a scene?
Arthur, love, you promised to buy me a drink a bit earlier. What about it?
Oh, yes. A little later on, dear.
Oh, so that's what you want, is it? A tart?
She happens to be a very nice girl.
Well, if that's what you want, I've got more on earth.
Good afternoon, good evening, hello. My name is Greg Bach, and thank you very much for joining us from the Archive, a British Television live chat. This is something that we've been trying to do on a monthly basis. Last month was me just kind of ranting about all things Doctor Who, which is very pleasurable as it happens. But I thought that we can make this a little bit more of a highbrow affair, and that's by bringing in my guest this month. And sorry, I'm running a little bit late. We're having some trouble connecting, and I think the trouble actually was on my end. So that's why we're running a little bit late today. But thank you very much for your patience. I would like to remind everybody, if you can, to please share this video out. If you can, if you're watching from the Kaleidoscope page, I doubt you could do so, but if you're watching from anywhere else, could you please share this? If you're watching this on Twitter, we're on the Kaleidoscope Twitter. We're also on the From the Archive Twitter. If you are watching from either of those destinations, can you please retweet this? Also, we're on the From the Archive YouTube page, and then we're on my personal profile page on Facebook, From the Archive, and Kaleidoscope. So if anybody wants to share to any of the other British Television Facebook pages, that would be really, really nice. I'd appreciate it very much. I also just want to let everyone know, too, that I just got back literally 2 days ago from traveling by car all around the country, really from the central, starting down in Houston, going to Virginia, Pittsburgh, coming back to Omaha, Kansas. I'm in Minnesota. And so I have picked up a cold of some kind. So if I disappear from camera, I may be sneezing. I might be blowing my nose. You might also hear like an animal here that is meowing, annoying. I haven't seen my cat in nearly 3 weeks, and so he still is very much my shadow. So as penance, I might have to bring him on camera, because right now he's in a box. Like he's in a box he shouldn't be. He's causing trouble almost immediately, because as soon as I talk to anybody, he gets this sort of like, he just gets in the way. Matter of fact, if I don't run him over with this chair, let me show you all. This is my cat, Linus, and he's a pain in the ass, but he is my little boy, and he missed me terribly while I was gone, and so he has to make sure that, you know, he gets in everything that I do. Like, he's afraid I'm going to leave him again or something, aren't you? What? Can I help you? Anyway, so I guess he doesn't want to show his face. That's what he looks like from the front. Now go away. So today, now I'm on the witness protection program. This is like last minute, having to come down here to hardwire in. So just know we're doing what we can to get this to you, because I really wanted to talk with Tim today. I really wanted to have this conversation because a couple of you had reached out to me when I asked, what do we want to talk about for February? And a number of you had come out saying, first of all, I want to talk about archiving, because that's a very, that's how we're hardwired, isn't it? That's something that we very much love and would love to talk about. Secondly, some people have asked, well, what about the ITV archive? Everyone talks about the BBC archive. Everybody talks about, what's going on there and how programs are retained that way. What about the ITV archive? And I think that's a really good question. And I thought that right away, first person came to my mind was Tim, who is I just really love talking to him about all sorts of things. But I really felt like he would be great for the ITV archive conversation. So we're going to go with that. And remember, folks, if you have a question or a comment, put it in there. I will see it. I will put it up on screen. I don't feel like I need to say this, but please make sure that it is, very, please be nice. There's no reason not to be. And I know that this is a group that's not going to be that way anyway. So I do appreciate that. And then for those of you who are joining me on my personal Facebook page, I can't put up your comments, so I'm going back and forth and looking. But I just see some comments coming up now. Podcast, I wish you could help me. And Chuck knows Linus very well. And so he sees him Sunday nights when he joins me on some other lives. Cats like the cute noises humans make. Yeah, maybe. So yeah. And then isn't this the truth? I mean, when I was working, and that's been a while now, but whenever like the Teams, Microsoft Teams would come on, boom, there we are. There's Cat, and he'd be like licking some plastic bag. Like, where did you find this bag? This is ridiculous. So, yeah. So thank you all for joining. I think what we're going to do right now is we're going to bring in our guest, and we're going to have a great conversation tonight. So I want to bring in Mr. Tim Disney, and Tim. How it feels like we've come a long way to get to this point right now.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, isn't it, already? We'll get there.
That's what happens when you do something with me. It just literally will take about 5 or 6 times longer than it should. Also, just gonna warn folks. I'm thirsty, so I just have a little drink that I'm gonna have. So please excuse me.
Yeah, me too.
Now, what do you got? What do you got there? Is that just water?
It's just lime, just a bit of lime juice. Lime. Yeah, that's good for tonight. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I forgot about that's actually good stuff. I remember having that when I've been over there, and I'm trying to remember last time I saw you. Did I see you? Well, last time I was in the UK, I think was 2019 was the last time I was in the UK.
Yeah, that'd be about right. Was it Missing Believe Wiped, I think, at the time, or it could have been?
Yeah, and I last Missing Believe Wiped was 2018 for me. So, because I just missed the December Missing Believe Wiped by literally a day when I got in. And I think there was a Kaleidoscope event one day and Missing Believe Wiped the next, and then I finally got my sorry self into the UK. So, and it's always a bummer when I miss those. So, and then I went to I got a tour of the ITV archive back in 2017 by Andy Gaffian, who runs it. Not to name drop.
Andy will love that. That'll be fine.
He gave me so much of his time. Chris and I went through.
Yeah.
And he gave me so much of his time that it was really a pleasure to do. I think he gave me about 3-4 hours because he gave us this comprehensive tour. Then he sat down with us and he gave us an interview, which for those of you who are interested, episode 10 of my podcast From the Archive, it's in there, and it's a great conversation. He's really good at explaining the idea of the ITV archive and stuff, but we want to talk tonight about other things. Before we get to it though, Tim, I do want to just say, I just want to point out to people the very first time I've ever seen you, and I want to show people the very first time I've ever seen you, and it was in a little something we call this.
For some people, their obsession with viewing old television leads them to collecting. Tim Disney recently stumbled upon his greatest find to date.
Really was my favourite find. It was quite surprising the way I found the Morecambe and Wise show. Really, for somebody who's actually interested in missing television, it was one that sort of crept up on me. I bought the film print from a collector via eBay, and I was thinking this would be one of the ATV shows. Morecambe and Wise did quite a few years run for Lou Grade and ATV. And I thought it would be nice to have this in the collection, just as another additional piece of bread and butter film collecting. Received the print from the collector, went to thread the film up for viewing, and realised that the leader on the beginning of the film said a BBC television film. And the list of guests that appeared on the show confirmed that this was indeed a missing episode. That for me, I would say to date, has probably been the most exciting find, purely because of the content. Morecambe and Wise is so loved, and just to get this film print back again was superb. It smells lovely as well.
They stitched me up with that interview at the time. You know what TV's like, Greg? It's kind of like, I made that error of sniffing the film can. I knew the moment I'd done it, I thought, they're going to use that.
You could not pay them any amount of money for them not to include it. They were all just jumping up and down when you did that. They're like, this is great. Thank you for giving us something. But here's the thing, and this is going to sound really silly. Not as silly as smelling film, mind you, but silly enough. Where I back when I started doing like getting into tape trading, recording on videotape stuff, I was 14 or whatever, and we'd get the Scotch tapes, the black label Scotch tapes, and you'd open up the plastic on it, and there'd be a smell of those Scotch tapes that I just absolutely loved, and knew that they're brand new, and I'm going to be able to have this wonderful, like, I'm going to put something on it. It was back when I was really going after Doctor Who. So I can kind of understand in a way, you know, what that is. I mean, I just love that clip, and I love that time shift episode anyway, because that for us, for especially me in 2003, that this was a real interesting look into you know, what it goes to find missing material. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, in that time shift was also the bit with Terry Jones and playing that complete and utter history of Britain from the Shabadan. And I mean, all these wonderful pieces was really a wonderful eye opener for myself, and I'm sure for many others too.
Yeah, definitely. It was nice around that time. It just sort of felt that a lot more of the story of missing episodes was starting to see the light of day. I mean, I know we'd had things like Missing Believed White during the 90s, but it just seemed around that time there was a bit of an appetite for doing something to get that message further out there on TV. And I'm sure that led to far more recoveries.
Well, and wasn't it around that time, maybe just a little bit before, that you had the treasure hunt going on? You also had, I think there was a couple of like documentaries, because the two Dad's Army episodes from series 2 were recovered, and they made a bit about that also, with Terry Wogan doing the narration to it. And that was really you're right, that there was that period of time that things felt like that there was some momentum, like with awareness, public awareness of not just Doctor Who missing episodes, but missing material in general. Do you think that we have kind of lost sight of that, or do you think that that momentum has kind of been, you know, is still around?
It's an interesting one, because I mean, when you think that documentary was nearly 20 years ago now, and I mean, I can't believe that. I mean, I actually had dark hair then, but it's all gone now. But yeah, I suppose we've seen a strange time where I know it's often been debated online before, but we live kind of in a golden era where we had so little archive TV to be able to view. We often heard stories about TV shows, and if you were lucky, you might find a little bootleg of one episode of something that was multi-generation. And then we had all the video releases and the DVD era. And now, of course, with online streaming, like, I mean, taking ITV, for example, with BritBox, I mean, they're sort of starting to experiment more with some more of the archive material. But yeah, it goes in fits and starts, doesn't it? I think sometimes we get like a rash of recoveries and then nothing for a while, and you sort of think that's probably it now. But you know, you just get a little like a burst, like Talking Pictures with the No Hiding Places. I mean, that has been brilliant. I mean, there's been some great material that they've been showing. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think in some ways we've got a lot, but in other ways we never have enough.
No, and the interesting thing about footage detectives, that's on Talking Pictures, and every week, for those who don't know, every week they're basically saying, we found something, here it is, here's how we found it, and then afterwards, if I'm not mistaken, Tim, they play what they found.
Yeah.
And No Hiding Place has been very prevalent on the Talking Pictures network. But the thing is like, now, from between 2003 and now, we have really niched ourselves quite a bit as society. When BBC4 was running that documentary, there wasn't streaming, there wasn't anything like that. Now, it really dissects us into very specific places. And I wonder if it's harder to get out the message now, because that's not going to be mainstream. The Treasure Hunt was mainstream. It was, a whole site, a whole campaign around it. This is now, it's like, unless it's a big name like an Avengers or Doctor Who, or Morecambe and Wise is a great example also, I fear that it's not going to get the type of response that it would have maybe 20 years ago. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think that's another sad part is the generation of people that would have really loved to have revisited some of that material. We're losing them over the years. I mean, it's great for us. We're getting to see this stuff for the first time, but I think even, dare I say, even our generation is getting older now, and TV's going for the younger audience. And it's debatable how many young people are watching TV, and things like Talking Pictures TV, like say niching, I think it's probably really the way. It'd be nice to see more stuff streaming online, and a network have been doing some stuff as well, which has been great.
Yeah,
some of those restorations and previews. But yeah, it does. I agree. I think it does feel like we're very much in a niche now, and that niche gets smaller by the year, which is it's a sad state of affairs, really. But
It is. Now, I do want to quickly, because I do want to jump into the ITV stuff before we just talk missing British stuff. But I do want to say your pic that you sent me, the picture you sent me, I do want to say, Tim, that I feel like that this was the look you gave me when I asked you if you wanted to be on the show. It's like, let's replay the moment. Hey, Tim, do you want to be on my live?
So, it doesn't look very enthusiastic, does it? It's a little bit.
Hey, Tim, can you drive me to the airport?
It looks kind of semi-corporate, semi-terrified, doesn't it?
All right, I'm done picking on you for now.
That's fine.
All right, good. I don't have any more clips of you in any other TV shows. You didn't appear as like a child actor or something that I missed, right? I just want to make sure.
Actually, while we're on the subject, very, very quickly, if you want to see a really obscure moment of me, I used to do, a long time ago, I trained in drama and did the degree and all that business, and did a few little bits of acting work, but I also used to do a bit of extras work. And if you ever see, I think it might be episode 5 or 6 of the remake of Survivors, they look through a little window and you see a dead body lying there. That's me.
You're the dead body.
I'm the dead body in Survivors. You can tell by the receding bit, I'm sort of lying like this. That's me.
That is awesome. Now I'm going to have to watch it. I made it my business not to watch it, but I'm going to have to watch it now.
It's pretty awful, but that's my little claim to fame. I managed to get into an episode of Survivors, albeit briefly.
Well, hopefully when they remake Tripod, we'll get you in that or something. Yeah. You could be the one that gets stepped on at the beginning, or the one that takes off its cap and it has the triangle in your head.
I went through a phase of playing corpses and police officers. That was the one at the time. But yeah.
Professional corpse, Tim Disney.
Yeah, that's the one.
So here, why don't we start with this? And I know there's going to be a lot of people watching are going to say, Greg, what the hell are you doing? But I'm going to do this anyway, because there's a lot of people who may not understand what we're talking about here. And I'd like to really start at the ground level, because first of all, I over here in the US, I have a lot of friends who watch British television, and they'll tell me something like, Agatha Christie's Poirot is a great BBC television series. Mm-hmm. That's not a BBC television series. So could we start real back and explain what ITV is? Because we know that the British BBC is government funded. We know, I think that's pretty well established, but I'm not sure people really understand that are not part of the UK. Let me clarify that. There's a lot of people watching who know exactly much more than I ever could about this, but what ITV is, and also what the other networks a part of it within ITV. What does that mean when you're watching something and it's like Yorkshire Television, it's ATV, Thames, all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, basically, ITV was launched in 1955 in the UK. It launched in the London region originally. There were two companies that were awarded the license to broadcast to the London area. They shared the week, so you had a company called Associated Rediffusion, which broadcast across the weekdays, and the weekends were a company called Associated Television, ATV, although originally they did start out as ABC, but that will completely confuse the map. But anyway, ATV is what they're known as, and I'm sure a lot of people stateside as well will be aware of ATV Productions. Various exports are a big company that exported an awful lot of output during the 60s and 70s. Really, the structure of the ITV network grew over the space of sort of the next sort of 5 to 7 years, really. And each region, a new ITV franchise was launched. So basically, before these companies existed, all you had was the BBC in terms of television. There was just the one BBC channel. So during the sort of late 50s and early 60s, these ITV franchises were awarded in different regions of the UK. And because they were done on a sort of a regional basis, they were awarded to these individual companies. And each company had their own kind of stamp or identity on what they did. They'd have their own company name. Sometimes it was related to the region. Sometimes it just might happen to be the company that was applying for the franchise, Granada being a prime example. I mean, being a company that had cinemas and all kinds of entertainment industry influence, certainly in the southeast and the London area. But they won the license for the Northwest, so they became very much a very Northwest company. They really focused on that regional identity. So really over the years, the ITV network, once it had expanded across the UK, it went through various phases where every sort of 11 years or so, franchises would be re-advertised. So anybody could apply for that franchise and try and win it. Most of the time it stayed pretty similar. A lot of the companies continued to get their franchise back and continue. There were a few small changes along the way. So really, ITV as a network, its foundation was very much a network of individual companies who shared networking together. So in the evenings, the lineup would be pretty similar. Overall, there'd be a lot of mainstream shows that would be shown across the UK. But each company would be responsible for its own area, sort of throughout the broadcast day, really. That's probably the best way to describe it, I think, is just really a patchwork of regional companies. Do you want me to go to where we are at the moment? Or
yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we do it? Because actually, someone had put in there that sadly ITV Network is all one cartel now.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, at the end of the day, it's happened in the radio industry. It's happened in the television industry too. I mean, there's been this, conglomeration of companies, people gaining more control. I mean, to sort of fast forward with the ITV story, there was the franchise reallocations that were announced in 1992. There was a big change in the way these franchises were allocated. They used to be based very much on the quality of programmes and how the company served its regional area. But the government moved the goalposts really, and moved it much more on who bid the highest and a little bit of what the programmes were about, whether the programmes were going to be any good that they were planning. It was very controversial at the time, and this was one of the events that led to companies that were well known internationally, like Thames in the London region, losing their franchise to Carlton. After those changes, some companies bid very low on their franchises. Central was one example in the Midlands, and they won it back with no opposition. But of course, it made them sort of ripe for takeover, really, because they'd saved that much money. And Carlton, who'd won the London franchise, had their eye on Central, and within a couple of years of that franchise change, they'd already taken control of Central. They also moved into other regions in the country. At the same time, you had the other powerhouse in the northwest, Granada, who were also sort of on the acquisition trail and looking for other companies. They'd taken over some of the companies like Anglia had become part of it, Border, TNT's, Yorkshire TV was also part of the Granada company. So we ended up at the end with two big companies running what was all of the network in England and Wales. And those companies eventually, I suppose it was only a matter of time, merged, took each other over, whichever way you want to see it. I would say basically Granada was probably the senior partner in the whole thing, and Carlton kind of went by the wayside. Not many people would shed a tear over Carlton. It has to be said their programming was controversial in the fact they commissioned a lot of their stuff. Whereas Granada had always produced its own output much of the time. So yeah, we ended up with the ITV that we have today, which is basically the amalgamation of Granada and Carlton, which is good for the archive in some ways. I'll not jump ahead, but because it's kind of brought a lot of assets back together, which is nice. But I can also understand from a viewer's perspective, we mourn those regional identities. Those regional companies had very strong identities on screen, local personalities that we knew. A lot of people miss those days, when you felt like it was your channel, it was in your region. And I totally understand that. I totally understand where people are coming from on that.
So now I think about the archive that I visited in 2017. And saw, and what you had just said, the companies that you had said, the properties you had mentioned now makes a little bit more sense to me as to what I saw in there. So what is the purpose of the ITV archive then?
That's a big question. I mean, really, on a day-to-day basis, very similar to what the BBC would do in terms of there are multiple angles to it. People like me love the preservation side. Nothing excites me more than rummaging around cans of film that are not in the main catalogue and having a look to see what's on them on a Steenbeck, and sometimes seeing things for the first time in years that have sat on a shelf in a can. It's always been there, but it's just not always been in the catalogue. You've got the other side of it, obviously, with distribution, the worldwide side of ITV, many of the current shows that are being distributed, as well as ITV products that are appearing on Talking Pictures TV, channels around the world. That distribution side is also fulfilled from the archive building in Leeds. It's a separate team, but they're responsible for distribution of all that stuff. So yeah, so it's really preservation and supplying all in areas of the industry, really, in terms of external customers and internal customers too. It sounds weird to say internal customers, but everything's in departments now. But
yep.
You know what it's like. It's the language of the business these days.
Well, and that's just it. Nothing is free internally also. And, you have people like, just saying, well, can't so-and-so make a copy, like they know there's a better quality copy of something. Can't you just run it? It's all internal. Can't you just do such and such? It's like, no, you can't, because everything gets a cost back. So there's nothing free. There is nothing that really works in that direction. So if I'm understanding correctly, for example, the remit of the ITV archive isn't to be a repository of anything that had been shown under ITV, as far as within all the networks that had been a part of it over the past 65 years or whatever it is. It's more of what the commercial properties that are now considered part of ITV. That's really what's going to be in there. Am I on track with that?
Yeah, that's spot on, really. I think this is the thing. Obviously the BBC has a heritage sort of remit now. At ITV, we very much take that heritage seriously. That's one of the things that excites us, that are really sort of archive orientated. It's that's one thing we do love and we do defend at all turns. And in fairness to ITV as well, that's not something that they are against either. They also understand that heritage. But I agree, it's just true. I suppose the primary operation is the commercial aspect of the business. It is a commercial business at the end of the day. But all I would do is just reassure everybody there are plenty of us there in the archive field who vehemently defend that archive and make sure that we look out for it. So don't worry.
Well, and I think, and I'm hoping that I didn't come across harsh with that, because I mean, that's just the facts of what it is. And I know that I'm sure you would be one of them to be like, I wish that, maybe they did do everything, but there's a certain point that it just doesn't work that way. It's not the BBC. BBC was outputting its own stuff, for a great deal of its television output. And this is just something that this way the ITV works. I mean, obviously I think we all mourn something like the TVS archive that, created stuff like Knights of God, and no one knows where any of those masters are. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, we don't think that they're necessarily destroyed. More that Disney owns it. Tim, are you holding out on us? Tim, you own the TVS archive.
The secret stash, yeah.
But I mean, that's just what it is. That's how it works. I have a couple questions here I'd like to run past you. First of all, Robert, since we all know the story of Sue Malden, how the BBC started their archive, it'd be great to understand the story behind how ITV Archive came together. When did was there an apparent archive selector such as a Sue? I mean, just curious what happened on that side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think really the best way to describe this. I mean, Andy Gavigan, who's running the archive at the moment, I suppose we went through a phase after the Granada and Carlton merger where you kind of tend to imagine an archive is all in one place. I always did, you imagine it's all under one roof. They've got all this stuff and it's all sitting neatly on shelves and stuff, which it is, but it could quite often be in many, many different locations. Certainly with the history of companies like ATV and ITC, Carlton had brought the stuff under one roof in Perivale, but there was still quite a number of assets that were out at various locations. Rank Film Laboratories at Denham was another repository of programmes that found their way back to ITV. Quite a lot of negatives and various distribution prints. And it's really been a case of trying to bring that stuff all together in Leeds. There was a period in ITV's history, probably, about sort of, I'm trying to think really when it would have been sort of 2007-ish. You'd still got archives in places like London Weekend, for instance, would still have ownership of their archive. It was still there before it started to head to Leeds. We kind of had a situation where as regional sites were closing, this sort of happened around 2004, places like Central, down the road from me, the studios at Lenton Lane in Nottingham, they were holding a lot of the Central archive, and that stuff moved up to Leeds when that site was closed. So sites were closing and material was coming in from those various sites and being shipped in. And Andy had the job really of kind of going through all this stuff. It all went into one big warehouse in Leeds where it could be sorted through and sort of accessioned really into the main archive. So that took quite a long time. I would say it's pretty much done now in terms of everything is there. We know it's there. We know what it is most of the time. I came into ITV about 6 years ago now to identify some of the rarer material, to go through some of the cans and to look at some, especially sort of ITC material. I'm not saying this stuff was technically missing. It was just, it needed to be sort of viewed, checked and sort of incorporated into the catalogue. We have two catalogues effectively. You have an archive catalogue, so we know in the archive where it is, what shelf it's on, what shelf it's moved to when it's come back in from somewhere else. And then you have the sort of like the product catalogue really, which is the more the broadcast side, where if they need a programme, they go into that catalogue and it will tally up with assets that we have in the main archive. So you've got a programme catalogue and the archive catalogue. And my first job was to bring a lot of the stuff that was in the archive catalogue over into the programme catalogue. So we could see, it was visible to people to be able to actually start using again. So it's been a long process overall. I wouldn't say we have an archive selector as such. Our general attitude to archive material is keep it, hang on to it. We're in no rush to dispose of assets. Quite often regional assets could end up at a regional archive, but the general opinion and attitude I know Andy and myself share is we keep it. If there's a shelf it can stay on, it stays there. It doesn't have to go anywhere.
You know, I hate to say it, Tim, you sound like the archive selector. I'm just going to say, you know, as far as like when the stuff that we're really into, and I know and I know there's a team also, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I don't mean to, you know, not include them, because I met them and they all were, you all were too busy to even look at me when I walked in. That was very hurtful. Here,
lunch, though.
let me show you. Hey, Tim, good to see you.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah. Actually, it's normally more stressed than that if I'm up to my eyes in spreadsheets and things. It's, yeah.
You had a little less gray hair then. Yeah, I mean, it was, but you know, that's just it, though. I mean, it was really. First of all, I cannot speak more highly of Andy. First of all, and it sounds like that. And correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like that. With him coming into the picture, that's where things started to get really organized. That's kind of the new era of the archive. Yeah,
Andy's a great guy. Honestly, he loves archive. In fact, to the point where quite often we end up having long discussions about, as you do, you know, as we're doing now. You know, you end up talking about various things, and you know, you can go off at a tangent. We have meetings, and half an hour's gone talking about something about completely unrelated, TV show related, but it happens. You know, we do love it. And Andy's one of the good guys, definitely.
He sure is, and I've had to reach out to him a couple times after. I mean, like, I'm talking a couple years after, and he acted like he remembered me, but he also he answered my questions, which were really nice too. Yeah. What you were doing in the archive. What kind of process was that? Because I'm assuming that there was a lot of detail checking on things to make sure that you were identifying the right piece of material.
Yeah, it's a combination of things, really. Obviously, you do as much research as you can do. When you find a title, trying to work out what it is. Some shows are quite obvious. Thinking of an example, the Arthur Askey series, Arthur's Treasured Volumes. That I remember that being an early one that I worked on, and just getting that into the main program catalogue, so it was accessible again. It had always been there, but it was just, you know, in transit from one place to another over the years, and once it found its way to Leeds, it's now back in the program catalogue. But yeah, I started out with about 4 massive spreadsheets, which had sort of barcode numbers of various assets to work through. Sometimes I'd have a scanty sort of bit of title as to what it was. Sometimes just a vague description where somebody just viewed it previously and said, "Oh, this is football," or whatever, you know, whatever show it was. So yeah, I'd start on the research. Just really a lot of online research, going through all my research documents that I have myself. As you know, I'm sure you're the same, Greg. We all build up massive archives of our own research materials. And so quite often, as exciting as it sounds going through film cans, and that's definitely a big part of it, or it certainly was in the early stages, it really comes down to working on spreadsheets. Archive really is, you know, very much a data-driven job ultimately. I was the same before I got, you know, into archiving professionally. I thought, oh, it must be great, you know, you can just pop a can off the shelf and watch something, but you're usually up to your neck in spreadsheets working on various material. So yeah, sorry, I've gone off at a tangent.
No, please do.
The research side, really, you gain as much research as you can, trying to identify what it is, transmission dates, cast, TV times listings, anything you can lay your hands on, really, to build up as much metadata as possible. And sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. Sometimes you've got pretty much everything from a run, and you know, without being able to always check an asset, you think, well, that you sometimes physically inspect the can and you can work out that's this episode that's missing in the middle of this run. That sounds a little bit vague, but that actually, to make those decisions in terms of your experience of handling those assets, you usually know that is going to be the case. So you can be pretty much 99.9% certain that asset is correct. So yes, it's a combination of research and really sort of taking a leap of faith on some things and viewing whatever you can, really, whenever you can. But obviously, in terms of 4 spreadsheets for material, as much as I would love to spend all day watching that kind of material, that's just not enough hours in the day, really. So you try the best that you can in the circumstances, really. And of course, you're under pressure all the time, you know, from from internal departments as well that want research on stuff. So you're kind of juggling, really.
Do you get people like producers and stuff working on other programs reaching out to you like, we think this might exist? Can you like run this to this top of the queue as far as trying to find it?
Yeah, that does happen quite often. Certainly, when I came into ITV, I was originally working for ITN, who had the franchise, but they were the company that were managing ITV's clip sales.
Mm-hmm.
Basically 9 months into that job, I got made redundant. ITN source closed, and then I ended up working in ITV itself. And they've taken clip sales back in-house, so ITV now handles all its own clip sales, which is good because it's kind of less of a sort of, the gaps between the businesses have closed now, which is even better. So yeah, so it's true. People will come and say, I've got a client who's looking for this. Can you suggest anything? Sometimes it will be, for instance, I won't mention clients, but certain TV channels are showing material, and they might have asked the sales team if there's something else that would be suitable when they end the run of a certain show. So you get to make suggestions on things like that, really. So quite often people pick your sort of knowledge to find out what's in that archive.
I have a lot more questions, but I'm going to put it over to the comment section because people are piling up questions, and I want to make sure that we get to them. And the first one, I'm going to be snarky because this makes me laugh. This is what I deal with every time we do one of these, and if, we don't get to the subject right away. We get someone who writes in, thought this was about ITV. So are you happy now? We're talking about ITV. We're going to get to it. Probably left a long time ago anyway. But seriously, you got to have fun, right? I mean, if you don't have fun, then what's the point? Someone, and they come up as Facebook users because they have to allow Facebook to connect with StreamYard. Not everyone wants to do that. But speaking of ITN, someone does ask, does the ITN archive still hold ITV programs?
Right. No, not at all. Even when ITN were managing the archive clip sales, everything remained in the ITV archive in Leeds. So everything was liaising with the main archive.
Okay.
Short and sweet, sorry.
and yes, I am happy. Have another lager. Trust me, I will. So anyway, moving on. Isn't it fun when you brawl with the people watching? That's what it's kind of all about. David asks, does ITV regard its archive as being an important part of national heritage when not commercially valuable, or is that sort of material handed over to like the National Film Television Archive?
It's a combination, really. ITV definitely. I can definitely speak. I won't speak on behalf of the company, but certainly for those of us that work in the archive, it is definitely seen as national heritage. The company does as well. I know that they understand the heritage and the value of this collection, and that it spans so many years. Of course, we're not just talking television. There's all the material that came in through the acquisition of the Rank Film Library. So we've got many feature films, many British classic feature films, are held at the archive in Leeds. So it goes back a long way. So yeah, we definitely take the heritage side of things seriously. In terms of disposing of items, I hate to use that term disposing because everybody panics when you say things like that. We don't dispose of it. I guarantee you we don't dispose of it. What happens is sometimes material will be deposited with other archives. So for instance, I mentioned earlier a lot of regional material. That has gone to a lot of the regional archives. Anything that's network based we'll always retain. So all your big sort of entertainment shows, all the dramas and everything, those are always kept. Sometimes thinning out is done, is another angle of archive work that a lot of people may not be aware of. But for a feature film, for instance, you could hold an awful lot of different negatives, an awful lot of different footage, which isn't disposed of. It could be deposited with the BFI for preservation, whereas as a business we may only need the feature film itself in most cases, although we do hang on to a lot of this material. I mean, I'm sure you've seen yourself, Craig, when you're around the vaults, that there are whole shelves related to just one feature film. The same for a lot of TV, actually, as well. Quite often decisions have to be made in terms of TV shows where the producers are contacted and asked if the material that we hold, many rushes for a TV show, whether they need to hang on to it. Sport's the same. We have a lot of sport. Sport is almost like weeds. Really. It comes up everywhere. There's a lot of sports tape and film, but we don't dispose of it. There are different departments that are responsible for it, and we hang on to it. And I know Andy's take on this, we've had many conversations about this, is that if we've got the shelf space for it, it can sit there. A decision doesn't have to be made. We're in a good position really in Leeds that there is a lot of space for material. The building may look sort of fairly small on the outside, but it contains a lot of material, and we do have. Yeah, there's been a lot of work that's been undertaken to sort of bring things together. So collections. I'm sure most people understand this in terms of even your video collection at home. When we had VHSs all over the shelf, we didn't always, although some of us probably did, keep some of the stuff together on the shelf. But stuff is just indexed and it's all over the building. But now what we've been doing with certain collections is bringing stuff together into certain vaults to make sure that the collection can be, given more exposure. It's quicker for a lot of the archive team to find those assets when people need them as well. Because it is quite a large building. As I say, it doesn't perhaps look massive on the outside, but it is very large on the inside. It's
bigger on the inside than the out. I've heard that in a TV show before.
Yeah, that'll be the one. Yeah, yeah. So, sorry, I forgot the original question. Really, I went off at a tangent. But
no. I mean, it just and I think the thing too. And correct me if I'm wrong here. There isn't a government, any sort of government request or anything in place for the ITV archive to be preserved, right?
No, that's absolutely right. It's it's a commercial archive at the end of the day. I have every confidence in the fact that the company and and the archive team will defend that stuff. ITV know it's a national heritage item. They know it's an archive of value, and actually in most cases wanting to do more with that value. One of the reasons I was brought in at the time to start working on bringing some of that material over into the programme catalogue was so that it could be used. I know that the work I did has generated quite a lot of clip sales, quite a lot of materials ended up being used that was sitting, sort of safely in the archive, but not in the programme catalogue, so nobody really knew it was there and could find it.
I'm just going to ask too, because I've been thinking about this when you're talking, and you do talk a lot in the physical sense. When I visited, it was a great week. One day I visited the ITV archive, and then the next day I visited the BBC archive. I don't think anyone would ever have that kind of luck just coming in from America. But they were doing a project of backing up all the material in LTO. Is there a digital backup project in place at ITV?
There is. It's been going for some years now, actually. I'm trying to think. I think it's kind of stored in multiple sites, obviously digitally, but we have servers in Leeds where everything's backed up to an LTO library. I think it's okay for me to say that project is ramping up quite seriously at the moment. There are a lot of legacy formats. So companies like LWT and Central particularly both use the D2 digital format. Mm-hmm. And really getting hold of machines to be able to play back D2 now, reliably, they're as rare as hen's teeth. They really are very difficult to get hold of. There are various, we've managed to source some, there are various businesses that also have those, but at the moment, I think it's okay to say we are currently working on D2. A lot of D2 assets from companies like LWT were already on Digibeta or Betacam tapes as well. This is the other thing with archive work. I know those who are aware of archive will understand this already, but if you're not familiar with archive work, every show has multiple copies. So, you've got safeties, masters, all these copies, and they're in different parts of the building, so, or in different locations occasionally. So the digital files, they're then backed up off-site as well to another location, which is another broadcast facility that basically is very secure, keeps all this sort of stuff. It's there. I think it's actually in about 3 different locations, the good old, 3 locations, or otherwise it's not archived. So, it's in multiple digital locations. And at the moment, we're kind of going through this phase of trying to get 1-inch tape and D2 particularly transferred to digital files. Many are, but there's still a few thousand that aren't, which are what we call high risk now. So
Right.
those have got to be done first.
Is there a, because you mentioned try to source D2 machines, and I read somewhere, first of all, we know that originally in the early 90s, like the BBC was going with D3. They moved to digital beta, Betacam. But I also read that they did the math, and that the amount of hours left in the heads of the machines that they have don't exactly correlate to the amount of material they need to transfer. Have you done any sort, and I'm not to say that they're not going to do it, I'm sure there's always a will, there's a way sort of thing, or maybe I misread that, but do you know if ITV has kind of done those kind of scenarios?
Yeah, basically we've, how can I put it, we've got it covered. We know we've definitely got it covered in terms of the amount of material. We have machines in-house to do it, so some of it's being done in-house. Some of that is also being done by facilities companies too. So we know there's definitely enough head hours, there's enough machines around to get this stuff done. Central D2 stuff was pretty much originated on D2. There was a lot of the 2-inch quad material that was produced by LWT, which they transferred to D2 in the 90s. They used a facilities company themselves at the time to get all their quads transferred to D2. They did an awful lot of LWT material, but the quads themselves were then donated to the BFI. So even though we're transferring D2 material, the quads are safe with the BFI, and they, I think it's okay to say, they've been working on their own transfer of quad material from LWT and other ITV material over the years, and digitising to their servers. So hopefully, between us all, we've got it covered. But yeah, it's the D2 thing was an issue for a while. I mean, our machines that we had at the time, they were on their way out. You could be in the middle of a transfer and you get the grey banding, which anybody knows D2 is a classic, bands of grey across the screen. Those machines were really on their way out. We managed to source more, but yeah, I think we've got it covered.
Yeah. Then David also follows up with just thanking you for the work you and the team is doing at the archive, which is nice to hear, because I mean, we just don't really talk about the ITV archive all that much. At least I don't hear it all that much, and but it is a good question about what happens to this material. And Robert is saying that it's great info. And this is, I mean, Tim, thank you. This is really good. I have some more questions, if timing is still good for you.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. Let's see. I got a couple, some good questions here. I want to start up here. Has ITV Archive kept off-air copies of programs like the BFI or BBC?
Sort of, not to the extent that the BFI has done their recording of all output. I mean, the only output that would be recorded by ITV would be obviously for legal reasons, in terms of just preserving the output for, I can't remember how many days it is now, but it's a legal requirement to keep all the output for a certain amount of time from Ofcom in case there are any comebacks. But in terms of, I get your point, sort of archiving off air. It isn't something that's really done at ITV. That would have been more a BFI thing. There are some programmes, interestingly actually, this was something that was quite fascinating. I was going through some old film cans, and quite often when ATV were screening a live variety show and they wanted to distribute it through ITC later, they would record the output on the telecine gear, capture the program output, rather station output, and then at some point when the negatives were turned to positive, they would splice out all the commercials and any presentation around it. But of course on the negatives, which we still have, there's some good stuff there. So it's fascinating that there's quite a bit on occasion of program output. So yeah, we do. Yeah, by accident, probably more by design, there is output from over the years stored in the archives. Quite often, if a live show was going out, it was done the same way, even during the 90s, as an example. Betacam would be running on the off-air output sometimes, and just, you know, the whole thing would be captured. So yeah, we've got some interesting bits and pieces, I suppose.
Do you ever have commercial commercial products or whatever come back to you all and ask if, because you might have recorded like the output from commercials from like 10, 20 years ago, if ITV happened to still have like the commercial, like the 30-second commercial or whatever?
Yeah, not really. I've not really had that, particularly from companies. Quite often, more than any, I suppose in those situations, a lot of the time you've got an archive researcher working on a particular documentary, for example, and they're looking for something, and they'll go to various archives to source that material. What I would do, as an example, so people could find this, I mean, as an example of that programme, I think it was the Mindy Carson show, one of the Val Parnell spectaculars from the late 50s, and that had all the output around it. What I would do in the catalogue, even in the programme catalogue, is make notes on it to say that it features commercials, continuity, all those things around the show, just in case anybody's looking for something from that era or wants the introduction, you know, the announcers introducing the show or whatever. And sometimes those things are quite nice to use. But yeah, we don't really often get people contact us directly for ads particularly. I think they tend to think ad agencies first.
And working at one, we don't keep them either. So,
no.
Paul, I did forget your question, so thank you so much for putting it back in there. Paul's question was, with Challenge going down the pan, is there a gap for the game show channel with ITV Gems?
It's an interesting one. I think game shows, certainly in the States, game shows are repeated a lot, aren't they? You've got
the Game Show Network, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely be mileage in something like that. I mean, Challenge did pretty well, I believe, you know, when they were screening a lot of that material. I suppose now in the online environment that we're in as well, I mean, that could potentially be an opportunity for some sort of online channel to be doing that too. Yeah, I think that there's a big following for quiz and game shows, and we have a lot of quiz and game shows still. It was quite surprising, actually. I mean, there are some, you know, shows that sadly didn't fare well. I mean, I think an example off the top of my head, Gambit, Anglia's Gambit, for instance, very popular at the time, but there's only a few episodes of that exist now. There are other shows, you know, that surprise you. We have complete runs of many game shows. So yeah, there'd be plenty of material to go at.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and you kind of wish too that there'd be, and if there is, I don't know of it, like channels that would show stuff like, you know, and this is not a game show, but like Golden Shot, or, you know, stuff like that, where you're really focusing on big time celebrities of the past. I mean, I think you all have Pluto over in the UK. We have Pluto over here, and there's like a Johnny Carson channel, you know, where it's just playing these wonderful gems that that you won't be able to see anywhere else. Those are nice things to have. And I know that, you know, stuff with Bob Monkhouse or Generation Game or anything else like that, it's going to have, not Generation Game, that's BBC, but, you know, it's going to have all these wonderful, you know, it has a lot of nostalgia, but maybe because I am a fan of that genre, I'm blind to see that it maybe not have as big of a following as I would think.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I still think there's plenty of leeway to give more exposure to a lot of the material. In some ways, it's one of the frustrating sides of archive is the fact we get excited about this stuff. You know, understandably, people who are younger in the business, quite rightly, they don't remember it. They just, you know, it means nothing to them. But yeah, it's frustrating sometimes to find material. I mean, I mentioned earlier on Arthur Askey's series, Arthur's Treasured Volumes. That, to my mind, would have been a great show to certainly for something like Talking Pictures. But a DVD release would probably be out of the realms of possibility now in terms of how many that would sell. You know, as we know, you know, DVDs sadly they're not in they're in decline, aren't they, compared to what they were. But yeah, it would be nice to see some of that material. Another example, I mean, I think partly as well, Arthur Askey is an example. He's probably not one of the best loved comedians anymore, sadly. A lot of these names, as people die, you know, these names start to disappear into history, which is a shame. But Charlie Drake being another one. I've often seen people asking about the show Who is Sylvia? which was one of his kind of more interesting ones from '67. We have most of that. It's not complete, but we have most of that show. So there are all kinds of little gems, that we could get out there ideally, but obviously it's going to cost somebody money to do that ultimately.
Well, and it's interesting because like this popped up, that this is being released. I mean, it's good to see that some of that stuff is happening. And I got to stop going on tangents here because we're getting people asking a lot of great questions, and I need to get them to you so you can answer them. For example, and I'm sorry, I don't know who this is from. What is the archive's policy on shows that were made but never transmitted? Like example, Hardwick House, and they corrected their spelling on that further down.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's shows that weren't transmitted, we still retain. There's no question. I mean, these are shows that were produced, even if they weren't transmitted, we still keep them. As an example as well, many shows are edited over the years, and you get different versions for whatever reasons, legal reasons or whatever. We keep those as well. So every show has, at a catalogue level, every show has different version categories. So we might go A, B, C, D, E, whatever at the end of the production number. So those are all retained wherever possible. There comes a time sometimes where if it's a minor edit or whatever, then that could go. But everything is kept. If it's something like Hardwick House, which is a great example, yeah, it's all there. It's all present and correct. And we have many untransmitted pilots dating right back. Trying to think of an example. Quiz Ball was a quiz show with Police 5 guy. It's gone out of my head now. Anyway, it's retained on film. It was kept on a tele-recording at the time. We still have it as an example. Many comedies that ATV made during the 70s that were pilots still retained. So yeah, in answer to that question, yeah, we keep it all.
Do you get requests from the copyright holders now for stuff that they may not have in their archive from when they took over? Like, for example, just off the top of my head, like London Weekend Television or something, that they see something missing, so they're going to check in with you all to see, well, do you by chance happen to have this or something?
Well, basically now London Weekend is no more.
Right.
In terms of everything's at Leeds, so the whole their archive, all those ITV companies' archives.
Maybe a better one would be like Canal Plus for
All right.
Yeah,
there've been occasions where material has turned up that belongs to other companies, and we do liaise with them to let them know that we have it. In a lot of cases, they're happy for it to remain where it is. On occasions, they may request it back, and obviously we send that straight back to them. Sometimes, quite old material from the 60s can still turn up. I think I've got a theory that a lot of these, when this happened, was rank film laboratories who were processing a lot of this material for the TV companies, taking the 60s as an example. And we've had occasions where we've found negatives to ABC material, which obviously belongs to Studio Canal, and we've notified them that we got it, so they know it's there. They're aware of it. Obviously, we don't exploit it because it's not copyright, but we'll happily keep it for them until the time when they request it, or if anybody requests it, one of their clients, we can supply it. So it's always kept safe. We would never dispose of anything like that at all.
Nice.
It's always there.
Nice. And then, Paul, I did forget your other question too. I'm not doing a very good job of the questions today. Do master tapes of Action Time, ITV Studios shows like Sky One, Spellbound, and Challenge TV's The Game Room, do they exist?
Yes. Action Time, I can say as an overall generalization without looking at specific details, but Action Time, we inherited that collection through Carlton's ownership of Action Time. So the Action Time material does exist in the ITV archives, definitely.
It's interesting. They talk about collections and whatnot, and I'm trying to find the comment here while my cat is pawing me with his claws, which is a very pleasant feeling, as you can imagine. But thankfully, to the guy who mentioned earlier, I have my logger. I don't feel it as much. Let's see here. Has the Bob Monkhouse archive been copied back to ITV Leeds? We know that Cal had it. We know that it was logged in by Kaleidoscope, and I'm sure you were a part of that as well as like Alan Hayes and Chris and everybody else. Had any of that stuff gone back to the archive?
Yes, some of it has. Things like the Golden Shot is now back in the ITV archive, that material. A lot of material is still with Kaleidoscope, who are obviously they're the people looking after it on behalf of Abigail, Bob's daughter. So they're still custodians of that material, but it's always accessible to ITV whenever we need it. And we do have some of that material back in terms of digibeta copies of material. So yeah, so not 100%, but there are chunks of it that are back in the ITV archive.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's cool. And Abigail, I met her at, I think it was the August 2018 Missing Believed Wife. That was really for Kaleidoscope stuff. She is, what a champion for her father's collection and her father's legacy.
Yeah, definitely. Abigail's marvelous. And just the fact that she's, realized the value of that material and made sure it was available to be digitized. It's incredible. And some of the not just ITV material, but some of the BBC material that Bob had as well. I was very I got to see some of my pal Bob episodes, and that I was amazed how well that had really stood up over the years, and it was a real insight into seeing how good Bob was, how ahead of his time he was in terms of British comedy. I know he used to get, and there were some viewers who sort of felt he was very American in his style, but to be honest, what was wrong with that? That style was good. That was, he studied some of the best comedians. So yeah, it's fascinating. And it's BBC stuff, but it was very interesting to see, and it'd be lovely to see that hit a wider audience at some point.
Absolutely. Robert, such a wonderful resource for all things Beatles. He's just wondering if you recently logged in any newly found Beatles related footage.
Sad to say, nothing really new at the moment. Obviously the Granada footage that we have is part of the crown jewels of the ITV collection. I would say it's. Sometimes I sort of think to myself about the material that we have in the archive and just the value in terms of heritage is quite amazing. But yeah, the Beatles collection, thanks to Granada, bless them, is still there and still safe and brilliant, and is often accessed by documentary producers. The recent Get Back documentary accessed some of the material.
For that, the first 10, 15 minutes, wasn't it just a whole kind of summing up to how we got to the Get Back sessions? I'm sure a lot of stuff came from there, or at least some came from there, yeah.
Yeah, they obviously rescanned assets in HD, well, higher than HD for those for that material, for that show rather. That montage was great.
Montage was
so good.
So when they want to do that, do you let out the materials, or do you, or not you? You know what I'm getting at, though. Does ITV lend out original materials, or does everything get transferred by an ITV approved either vendor or internally?
Yeah, I suppose it's on occasion material is supplied digitally from our own archive. In the case of a big production like that, I don't know the ins and outs of that particular deal and what happened there, but it's possible they may have borrowed original elements with masses of insurance, and of course we would have that material backed up as well. That was me for a minute.
No, it's classic that every time I do one of these, either a doorbell rings, a phone rings, no one contacts me ever. No one ever, they don't know I exist. But the moment I click live, then suddenly, it's like, oh, we haven't talked to Greg in a while. Let's talk to him right now. So yes, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, basically, sometimes original elements are borrowed. It's not done lightly. There's insurance in place, and it's material that's also backed up. So in the worst case scenario, which is thankfully highly unlikely, but if something were to happen, that material would be covered. It wouldn't be gone forever, thank goodness. And certainly with Beatles material as well, I suppose so much of it's been used in so many different productions. Yeah. We would love to find some new stuff. it would be just lovely to open some dusty film can somewhere and find something completely unseen. But sadly, I think so many documentaries now, I mean, it's great for ITV in terms of clip sales, but so many documentaries have used that material that nothing really surprises us anymore. I think that's, it's frustrating in a way, but it would be lovely to discover something.
Well, it's really interesting. When I did my interview with, I think Keith, for the Beatles, talking about Beatles recordings and whatnot, same time I did the Doctor Who Randolph tapes, I asked the question if we pretty much, as like Beatles expert, pretty much knew all of the recordings that the Beatles had done in the 60s, like on television. Like, do we, even if it doesn't exist, do we know what is out there? So that, and so it would be really interesting that if you did find something that, say, that no one even knew about, that would be pretty incredible. And I don't think it's impossible either.
It's certainly possible. It never ceases to amaze me with film cans. I mean, film particularly, because it's not a medium that's very easy to view straight away.
No.
It's certainly not uncommon for something to have been put in the wrong can. It happens in all archives where material has been returned. Because I think that's the other thing, what we were touching on earlier on about assets going out. Obviously, as a commercial and working archive, material is coming in and out all the time, for various commercial aspects of the business, DVD releases, all kinds of things. So material is loaned out, and obviously we check it back in again, and it comes back safely. But yeah, I've lost my original point. But yeah, it's as a working archive, it's in and out all the time. This material.
Well, and yeah, I mean, and I don't know. I mean, it's just such a fascinating thing. That something like that could be found in, and that like you said, anything is possible. I think as soon as someone says that something is not possible, kind of karma turns it around and shows us, like, here's some new Beatles footage or something. My question to Robert, though, is with the Get Back documentary, was there anything new in there that you hadn't seen? Because being such a keen-minded Beatles fan, I mean, I don't know if I doubt this stuff has ever leaked, but I'm just curious if that was all new for him. And we don't want to turn this into a Beatles thing per se, but it's very interesting. Peter, though, has asked, does ITV have any plans to fully exploit its extensive soap opera archive, perhaps putting Coronation Street and the other long-running serials from its inception on BritBox or any other streaming platform? I know this isn't your area, but I mean, I mean, we all know the British soap opera is is very important to everybody, just as like Top of the Pops and that audience, Coronation Street in particular.
It is amazing, just how much Coronation Street has been made over those years, and as you say, it's a very British thing. We love our soaps over here. I can't speak on behalf of BritBox. They are a separate entity, as you say. I mean, they're part of ITV, but they're a different department as such. They've obviously tentatively stepped into soaps. I was looking on there recently with the Coronation Street. Even the BBC's El Dorado's popped up on there now. It's definitely happening. It'd be interesting to see how they would approach something like Coronation Street. I know they've taken selected episodes from different years, but to make it all available, while it's feasible, I'm not sure whether they would. It'd be a decision they'd take commercially, really, as to how much interest there would be, I suppose.
I mean, I own Dark Shadows on DVD. I own all of the episodes. Why do I own all the episodes, Tim? Why do I own this program? I don't understand. I don't know why I have it, but I'm glad I have it at the same time. And Coronation Street is probably about 10 times 15 times longer than Dark Shadows. I mean, I don't know. It's a very interesting thing. Now, I had seen some stuff online. Maybe you have a better idea. Do all the episodes of Coronation Street exist, or are there some gaps in there?
I don't know officially. I believe from received wisdom, really, that there may be one missing. But I think
that's what I heard. Yeah,
the run is I think. The majority, the run should be there, and we say there's one missing, but maybe there's not. Maybe it's just been mislabeled somewhere. I mean, a lot of the Granada stuff is very well catalogued. Granada did a great job of that themselves, anyway. and it's been brought into the whole ITV catalogue. And it's a library that's often tapped because Coronation Street itself producing many spin-off documentaries and celebrations, and quite often needing to access that material to look back at various storylines. Although, in fairness, with Coronation Street, they have their own archivist who will often access material from the Leeds archive. So they really do know their stuff inside out. It would be interesting. It would be nice to see some of the. I know Coronation Street's the biggie,
Yeah.
but there were so many others. I'm not sure you'd want to see the whole of Albion Market as an example. That was in the 80s soap. I remember back in the 80s. I don't know why, but I loved that soap for a while. I quite enjoyed it. So I have dipped into one or two to have a little look and see what it was like. But you revisit some things and you think, no, I'm not sure it really stands up. It's good to have it, and it's good that it's there, and it's there in case anybody does need it. But yeah, I've got to be honest, I'm not sure about complete runs of soaps, how they really fare commercially.
I mean, I don't even think, and I'm thinking about the US BritBox. I know we have EastEnders on there, but my guess is that that's more of a up-to-date sort of like from when BritBox started, that's more of like the current stuff. I could be wrong. There might be some archival stuff, but I would highly doubt that there is the entire run starting back in 1985 or whatever on US BritBox.
Yeah, I think the other aspect of it as well, which is often forgotten about, I think when you start working in archive, you kind of come in all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and it's all exciting, and it's like all your dreams come true, which it is marvelous, but you soon wake up to the commercial realities. So, as an example, if you did put all of Coronation Street on BritBox, I'm not saying they're going to, but if they did, you'd be spending a large amount of your budget on licensing that material, because I think there's often this misconception that the material, if ITV owns it, ITV can stick it on BritBox and it's there, but it's not true. You've still got all the usual clearances to do to pay for that material to be exposed in that way. Some of it's money that moves internally, of course, from BritBox within ITV, but then of course there's the artists and everybody else, one of the other rights holders that get paid. So I'm not sure whether they would go, and blow a great big chunk of budget on something like that. As much as people, I'm sure, would enjoy it, it's just I'm not sure how that would stack up financially. Really.
Right. How many people are going to watch from the beginning and make it all the way through?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I mean, and it's tough. I mean, I know that there would be some that would try for sure. I get it. But I mean, you got to look at, and as people who are trying to figure out the budgets and trying to figure out all the stuff that goes along with it, it's like you just said, I mean, who wants to put on so many years of something that may have just a fraction of people checking out? Chuck has asked, where we can go see the archive has in its possession of an online site exists. The thing about that, I'm assuming, Tim, part of me thinks that they don't really, I mean, does anyone really want the public to know exactly what's in the archive? And I don't mean to be so harsh about it, but at the same time, I know that if something is said in our community of enthusiasts, that suddenly that retention is always with someone. It's always going to be kind of thrown back at said person or whatever. But also, as a commercial viability, it's nobody's business technically, is it?
I think that's the thing. It's very difficult because I understand it from having been on both sides of the fence. There's the passion behind all these shows that we love, and we kind of want to know that they're safe, and we want to know these things exist and that we may get to see them again, or ask when we're going to see them again. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Greg. In terms of the commercial archive, as with any business, there's commercial sensitivity. There's, in some cases tonight I may have said too much. I don't know. I'll probably find out soon. But but yeah, it's a tricky one. I don't think there'll ever be a position where all those assets would be listed online anywhere. It's a lot of companies just wouldn't do it. It's not particularly that we would want to keep that sort of keeping secrets, but I suppose from a commercial perspective, some of the information is sensitive, so you kind of wouldn't divulge an awful lot of stuff.
I think the closest we're going to get to is here, to be very honest.
Absolutely, it is.
And this is something that whenever I do a video, I talk about TV brain. I don't know if people quite understand. And I think that, and this isn't a rip on anyone who's watching, budgets are tight. I understand that. But, sometimes it costs money to get information. You pay money to buy a book that has reference material in it. This is the same thing that, I think some people think, well, it's online, it should be an online resource. That means it's free, and that's not the case. And I've been a member. I work with Kaleidoscope. You work with Kaleidoscope. I've been paying for my membership for TV Brain for 3 years now. I'm happy to do so, and I go to it every day, really, when I'm working in the realm of my research in this area. You'll be able to see, to the best of their knowledge, and they have, like for ITV, they have a guy on the inside that is fact checking. That's not being illegal or anything. It's truly just being research oriented, that you want to know what kind of format something exists on. Does it exist? Do sequences exist? Does audio exist? What are the cast of this? I mean, this is like having Infax. This is like having the ITV internal system at your fingertips. It's everything in one. It does cost money to access it, but to be able to have those questions answered, this is the way to do it. And I do fully stand behind this site.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and Chris and Simon, excuse me, just have a quick drink.
I made you that emotional. I apologize.
Yeah.
Next time that you're getting a drink, I'll just put this up.
Yeah, that'll scare the cat away.
Cover up on you.
Yeah, Chris and Simon, who work on that database for TV Brain, they're constantly updating that database. I suppose when we used to have the massive Kaleidoscope guides, which we have at ITV, there's a big part of those books still at ITV.
Yeah, I saw
that. We also access TV Brain as well, and the flow of information goes two ways. Quite often TV Brain and Simon and Chris's research has helped us at ITV, and we share some of that information back with Chris and Simon to input into TV Brain. So it's a really good combination where that information is flowing back and forth. And I agree, Greg, without sounding like an ad for TV Brain, it's a really good place to start your research. If you want to know whether something exists, what format it's on, it's a really good database. I mean, I would just say, sounds like an ad, but give it a try for a month, see if you like it. Nothing to lose, is there really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does sound like an ad. I mean, and I say that for myself, but once you start using it, it's hard not to be able just to pop on. And I'm an armchair archivist. I have a massive collection of DVDs, beautiful files, all this stuff that I put into my own database. To do so, I need TV Brain to do it. I just do. I just need it, and it works out very well. How are you doing on time, Tim? I want to be very careful. I have more questions.
I'm fine. Let's do some more questions. If it's all coming in, let's do it.
This one you can answer if you like, but I think the answer is they should reach out to BritBox. Anyone who wants to see something on BritBox should reach out to BritBox.
Yeah, definitely. Sadly, as much as I would love to have influence over what happens on BritBox, it's not in our department as such. So yeah, definitely request it from BritBox. I know for a fact that BritBox are keen to hear from people. They will listen to suggestions of programs. I know quite a few archive programs have ended up on BritBox as a result of people requesting material. Obviously, they can't fulfill everything. They've got their own budgets in terms of what they can license and some things that they can or can't license even. But yeah, they're definitely listening to what people are saying. So yeah, definitely contact BritBox.
I get surprised by what the UK BritBox is adding all the time, and stuff that to me is very, still commercially exploitable, such as the Avengers. If I'm not mistaken, the Avengers is on there. Yeah. Over here, I was surprised because they put on Hancock's Half Hour, that surprised me greatly. It looked horrible. And because the prints don't look that great anyway, I mean, it's very, very primitive telerecording, but it was there, and I don't know how well it did. I don't think it's there anymore, but it's stuff like that it is kind of a real juggling act of what to include, what not to include. and then they try stuff out. And I do give the BritBox folks, at least in the US, a lot of kudos for trying out different things. I know them. I work with them on other things. A woman named Debs over there, she's amazing, and they really do want to bring stuff over that that maybe we haven't seen, as well as the stuff that we love and maybe just only watched on PBS over here, but PBS stations don't show the stuff like they used to. Paul had asked, what happened to London News Network Archive after ITN Archive closed?
I must admit that is a question that's got me stumped. In terms of news, we do hold a lot of news footage for various news departments. We retain that material as long as they need to retain it, but I'm not really sure with London News Network. I would imagine it's possibly with us, but I couldn't say for sure. If ITN produced it, I would be more inclined to say it's probably with ITN. They obviously maintain their own archives.
I think I know the answer to this one because this isn't your department, but someone asked, will ITV make more black and white ITC shows available, as they have sold black and white episodes of the same to TPTV? But it's more of what TPTV wants to show, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the material is all there, and and in most cases available. Certainly with ITC shows, a lot of the material was originally done on buyouts, as I'm sure most people know. It was one of the reasons why we see so much of that material these days internationally, and have done over the years. So yeah, it's really down to TPTV. If they chose to show it, they would obviously have a dialogue with ITV already, as they've been showing various shows. So yeah, it's a case of getting TPTV to dip the hand in the pocket and go for it.
And once again, right? If someone wants to see something, they should reach out to TPTV and be like, we'd like to see this. And the same with network. And a network seems to be, network, for example, seems to be open to anything. I mean, the vast amount of material they have released over the last 25 years or whatever it's been has been, I would have never guessed, some of the stuff they released.
It's just absolutely, at one point it was unthinkable, wasn't it? If you think back to the early 90s when Polygram were holding the ITC material, and we were seeing the occasional video compilation of 3 episodes of The Worker or something, and then we get the whole lot on DVD as one example. Just many shows that we never thought we'd see, and they've done really good work over these years. Incredible.
Yeah, I remember a friend of ours here in the States, Kathy. She had very, very poor quality episodes of Ace of Wands, and it looked great, whatever. But then next thing you know, 15 years later, the whole thing is released in a set, and it's all just there, compact for us. It's incredible. We are lucky, I think. I think we're lucky in that regard. Are there still uncataloged tapes and film cans in Leeds?
It's a tricky one, really. I would say the majority is definitely catalogued now. We've really been through a lot. I would never say never in terms of things, something could turn up. Things do still turn up. But yeah, the majority is now catalogued. It's certainly catalogued in an archive term. I mentioned earlier on that we have the 2 separate catalogues. So you've got your archive catalogue and you've got your program catalogue, which is the site that the ITV business uses to access and find out what they can access and use. So yeah, from an archive perspective, yeah, there's an awful lot that's now catalogued. There's very little to discover at the moment, but things do still turn up.
And I think it's worth pointing out too that I bore people to death talking about, I've been working with UCLA to get back the Hugh and I episode, Chinese Crackers, and we know that it took them a while to catalog all their stuff, as well as they're one of the rare places that do put it all online, but they've been putting it up in chunks, which is how we found out about stuff like the Avengers episodes, or even Hugh and I, that they held. And, they look at it as just pieces of, parts of collections. And we're looking at it like, this is stuff that's missing that, UCLA wouldn't know about.
Yeah. It can be difficult. And those negotiations can be quite tricky, can't they? Certainly when you're trying to liaise with those sort of archives, they kind of cling on to the stuff, and they need all the clearances and everything, and they put you through the hoops.
At the risk of boring people with this story again, I had a letter from Claire, the head of the BBC archive, saying that Greg Bakken has our consent to work with UCLA to get back Hugh and I Chinese crackers, and they still didn't think that that was enough for them to. And kind of what we talked about with the Beatles footage, they would never let it out, nor did the BBC expect that. I mean, BBC and ITV, they're very savvy in these worlds, but they just to even get some kind of digital copy, that was very difficult. Yet at the same time, in hindsight, now that we have it, in hindsight, we understand too that there's a lot of there needs to be precautions. They have to be careful.
It's very difficult when, I mean, in the case of UCLA, it's not their copyright. Archives are very sensitive to that. I mean, we are ITV too. There's material we hold, obviously, at times that isn't ITV copyright, and you have to be very careful with that material, and you have to make sure that it's not just released, all over the place. It's just the way it is. It's just business.
It is, but it's funny because they told Claire at the BBC. There are different, in this episode, there are racial stereotypes. You must make sure you point it out before any broadcast. It just makes me laugh that UCLA is telling the BBC how to do their business.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I kept telling them, they're not going to broadcast it. Don't worry about it. Getting back to Robert talking about the Beatles, a lot of the 1969 footage was new. Thank you for that. I kind of figured that. Jazz, who is a future guest on this abode, and unless he changed his mind after watching this one, does the ITV still retain the ITC pilot The Fox, made in color in 1957? It was a potential ITC swashbuckling series. Now, this will be interesting if you know this off the top of your head, because this means that you do carry the breadth of the ITV archive in your brain.
And I'm sad to say I will fail on this one. I don't know for sure without checking.
Well, should we see if it's on TV Brain real fast?
That's a good idea. Yeah, I don't do anything on this computer.
Real fast while we're chatting about the day and seeing how things are going. Let's see, what was it that he's looking for? The Fox.
The Fox, yeah.
Now it should be on there, but we'll see. Well, it should be listed one way or the other. I don't have my.
I would say, generally speaking, I mean, ITC material is, it is fairly comprehensive. It wouldn't surprise me if it did, but obviously I can't say for sure. But if you can see anything on TV Brain there,
I don't see anything on there for the Fox. Hold on. It's right there as the Fox. Yeah, it's right there, and I totally missed it. Let me see here real fast. Pilot was revised. It looks like that it's held as 35 as a 35 millimeter film. Jazz, is this the one starring Anthony Dexter, Susan Beaumont, Jane Griffith? It says here the pilot script was revised on the 14th of January. The Fox was described as in his late 20s or early 30s, swordsman, hypnotist, ventriloquist, magician. Holy shit. The 1957 screening was unbilled, followed by a reshuffle of programs that evening, which saw the Jack Jackson Show and Armchair Theater swap times, and box office get dropped completely. So it's the 25-minute a Bischoff Diamond production for ITP. Am I on the right track, Jazz? Let me know. But if it is, this is perfect. Why you want to consider getting TV Brain? I'm just saying, That's how I do my ads.
Yeah,
I'm a professional in this realm, as you can tell. That's why I still work in the field. Let's move along here. This is reference to something we talked about before. Can you refresh my memory what we're talking about here? Didn't someone find that last year? Kaleidoscope. It sounds a bit too familiar. Let me know what you're talking about. I apologize. I don't know what that is. Chuck says Dark Shadows is 26 seasons, I believe. What planet are you on, Chuck? There's 5 years of the series, unless you're counting the Big Finish and the rehashes and the films. You got to answer yourself for that one. Oh, Jazz says it's been found, but was wondering more where it is now. I have a copy, or just wondered really. So it
Oh, okay.
might be. So after all that, he said that he knew that it existed.
Got it. Okay.
So I don't, that's who knows, right? I mean, it could very well be there, but
yeah, this is it. Without checking, I won't be able to say for sure, but I would
you
say
got
it probably would be.
you got to be better. You got to be better
I
at
know.
memorizing.
I should know the whole catalogue, but I know great chunks. Oh dear.
So
I'm never going to live that picture down, am I?
it's great. I mean, hey, look, you're a good-looking guy. I got this to deal with over here, so better have anything up on TV. Let's see here. Which ITV company is the worst represented in the archive apart from TVS? And this is probably more from your knowledge of working in just your love for archive television, I would say, right?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think. Really, that's a tough one, actually. I'm really not being diplomatic either. It really is a tough question to answer. Trying to think. I mean, every company, even Granada has its holes in the collection. I mean, obviously Granada is a very comprehensive collection, but yeah, it's I'm trying to think because I kind of work on different projects as well. So as an example, I've recently been working on Ulster TV. So I started off on ITC and all that material, and then I worked on Carlton for a while, and then there was Border for a while, and most recently UTV. I would say rather than worst represented, I was pleasantly surprised actually looking at companies like Border and Ulster of the breadth of their material. It's unfair, and unless you lived in those regions at the time and you saw their output, a lot of it was just shown regionally, and to see the quality of some of their output from over the years has surprised me more than anything. So I would say all companies have their holes. The ones with less holes are probably the ITC material, but then you could also say that on the flip side of that, ATV has an awful lot of material that was just wiped, transmitted and wiped, well into the 70s. Well, right to the end of ATV, they were still wiping things. So, sorry, I can't really help on that one, Paul. I wish I could answer that question better, but I'm really not being diplomatic, but I really couldn't say for sure. They've all got their pros and cons.
Sure. And that makes sense. Here's one that I think it's does only 50 episodes of the Army Game exist in the archives from the late 1950s. I think it's like 53 or 52, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm off on that. But I mean, yes, that is the amount.
Yeah.
And that's a Granada show also.
It is very, very well represented. I think with the network release, I think they pretty much covered whatever is in existence at that. Well, certainly at that time, I've not heard of anything else coming to light. So
no,
I would say that's pretty much where we still are.
But isn't that's still there's still a great deal of episodes that don't exist, if I'm not mistaken. And I wrote an article about a couple episodes of the Army Game years ago, and I wanted to reach out. I was hoping to get more information from Ian Baird about it, and it just never materialized. But the one thing that it appeared to me for the Army Game, and I don't know if you have any idea, is that you look at the network listings in the DVD for the Army Game, and a lot of them don't have names for the episodes, and it makes me wonder if like the paperwork for these stories, if like a lot of information is missing from these episodes, where actually the only thing that we do know is like the episodes existing themselves.
Yeah, it's very likely. The paperwork side of archive is another massively fascinating subject I could bore for England on, seriously. I lose myself in paperwork frequently when doing research, but yeah, it's probably likely. I would say with material of that age, sometimes you find the relevant paperwork for each individual production, but quite often there'll be paperwork for the program and one or two sporadic bits of paperwork for the productions for material of that age. But a lot of the time as well, Army Game's a good example, very similar to a lot of the early ATV material from the 50s. is you're looking at tele-recording numbers, and you're sort of trying to piece the jigsaw puzzle together. One of the never-ending problems I had was with Emergency Ward 10.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's ever really been able to get to the bottom of exactly what those episodes are. I know they've been released on DVD, but I still believe there are some discrepancies there looking at it. So you're kind of looking at the run of tele-recording numbers. You get used to tele-recording numbers after a while, where you begin to think, oh yeah, that's about 1959, or that's about, you can even get it down to the month eventually, because just working on the systems and piecing things together. But yeah, that's probably more than likely with the Army game. I would imagine there's probably gaps in the paperwork, and also with no episode titles, it's very difficult to match those up.
It's sad. It makes me sad, and I do remember a couple episodes that, like, the end credits cut out also. There's just a lot of stuff that is missing, and I feel like that we're lucky to have anything from it, actually.
Yeah.
And for us Doctor Who fans, of course, those who don't know, William Hartnell had a starring role in that, but he was in the early episodes, left for a while, came back.
Yeah.
And that's where we're lucky that a lot of the episodes that are on the set, were in the middle, but also when he came back. So there's a fair amount that's of his episodes that are on the set. But I know that the world doesn't revolve around Doctor Who, but I do, for context sake.
Yeah, I think it's interesting from the archive perspective. I know what it's like, because, as I say, I've been on both sides of this argument. But I think a lot of the time we spend our time worrying about the things that have gone, but it's very easy to forget the sheer volume of material that does still exist is quite phenomenal for that period. Certainly late 50s, early 60s. It's stuff that didn't really have a market, a big market beyond the domestic market. It's just amazing that a lot of stuff was still kept over the years. Obviously, Granada being the case with this one, but
and I bore people all the time when I say this, but when people complain about the lack of Doctor Who episodes, that there's Doctor Who episodes missing, I love to point out that something like Dixon of the Dock Green, I believe, has 436 episodes that were made, and 400 are missing.
Yeah.
And I know that Dixon of Dock Green is not Doctor Who, but when you look at it from an archive perspective, as we are, and as the people watching, I don't think you can really make I don't feel like you should play favorites. I know that people have their favorite shows and stuff, but being an archivist means that you want to keep as much as possible. You want to preserve as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the thing that drives us all on, isn't it? I mean, ideally, if we had a full set of everything, it would be marvelous. But quite often as well, when you're handling archive assets, you're reminded so often when you open a film can up and you see notes that have been left inside, or just various bits of documentation. It's always a real reminder of just how many people down the years have handled that asset, and the reason why it's still here today. I mean, I've often thought about that. You see where somebody's made some notes in 1960 something on one of the cards in the tin, and you think that person's probably no longer around even. But the fact that they took care of that material at the time is why it's still here today. And it just kind of makes you realise you're just a small link in a very long chain of archive.
Very much so. And I also want to point out too, when we on Kaleidoscope put out some sort of discovery, like Crystal put out discovery emails, and it might be some weather report or some presentation. And I know that people get disappointed because they're hoping it's something on a bigger scale, but you have to have those finds. They're important. They can't be overlooked. And I know that we all want to have those really important big programs, but it just doesn't work that way. But yet we're still, for every news report that we find, that means that there's a possibility of a show that we're really, really excited about might get a find, and we chisel away, and next thing you know, you find the Avengers Tunnel of Fear. It's a game of patience, really.
Yeah, it still amazes me, the material that turns up. Well, I think it amazes us all. Things you thought you would never see. They just turn up out of somebody's collection somewhere. Somebody didn't realise it was missing, and it's a fascinating subject. It's what keeps us all so interested, isn't it? It is. That hope springs eternal,
and just the idiosyncrasies of how something might turn up or where it turns up. Has anyone looked for programs at the SSVC? And I'm going to have to admit, I don't know what that is.
That's Services Broadcasting,
Okay,
which is based at Chalfont St Peter or St Giles. I used to work there, so I should know. St Peter, I think. And I didn't work for SSBC, but I worked at the same site. And they're pretty much they originally used to broadcast via LWT. They used to run the facilities from a small setup in Wembley, and they were running like 2-inch quads to transmission to Germany from there at the time for the overseas forces. I think that's pretty much exhausted. I remember many years ago, actually, this is a rather sad sight, but we have over here, I'm sure you have a similar thing over in the States, but like army surplus depots.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing these huge containers full of these AGFA 2-inch quadruplex tapes with LWT, London Weekend stickers on them from their facilities. I would imagine they were probably bulk erased before, or most were, but these were just disposed of at the time. So I would say in terms of archive material turning up from SSBC, I would say it's extremely unlikely. I think I may be being unfair to SSBC, but I don't think they even kept an awful lot of their own output because the programming wasn't theirs. In the first place, it was BBC and ITV material. But even recordings of SSBC as a service tend to be domestic affairs and things. I would hope somebody from SSBC could correct me on that. I'm not, I don't want to say anything against SSBC, but that's the impression I get. So I would think it's unlikely anything is going to turn up. But of course, if it did, we'd welcome it. We'd welcome anything that turns up. We're always open to new material. If somebody finds something, and we can get it onto a format and preserve it again, we would. We've had returns of various things that we've made sure get back into the archive.
That's great. I don't know if you've been watching the Kaleidoscope Facebook page when I posted about doing this live, but there was a discussion that broke out, and I'm glad that they put it on here because I did forget about it. Does ITV Archives sell copies of programs to the public?
Yes, that's the good news. They do, and I know with other organisations like the BBC, you tend to have had some involvement in the production very often to get access, but ITV will sell copies of programmes to the public. If you contact Viewer Services on the ITV website, I think it might be just viewerservices@itv.com, they will initiate that process for you in terms of accessing that programme. I'll be honest, not everything's available. It depends on what format it's on. If it's on film, for instance, you would have to pay for the transfer of the film in addition to any other costs that are, sort of normal sales costs on top. And if anybody, if you know about film transfers, I'm sure you're aware, Greg, they cost hundreds to get done. So film, I would say you need a big bank balance, but for things that are on tape, quite often, if it's a show from the 80s or 90s, the chances are it's on Digibeta, so it'll be a fairly easy process. I won't name the guy, but there's a guy specifically who deals with those requests, and he used to contact me a lot to sort things out when I was on the catalogue side of things, and add things to the catalogue that were requested that we knew were in the archive but weren't yet in the program catalogue. So yeah, we do. We'll be able to sell programs quite happily if you just contact Viewer Services.
That's interesting. I got to see if there's anything that I'm missing, but I don't think so. The thing that's interesting about that too, I know people are going to be like, well, if it's digital, they can just make a copy, but it doesn't ever work that way. And I do feel like I need to point that out because when I worked in the agency industry, I'd get that too, like, oh, just make a copy, but there's always something that needs to be done. Every single thing that happens, even if it's digitized, needs to go into an edit suite. Tops and tails need to be edited. All sorts of things need to happen that people just don't think about, and that means hours, that means money every single time.
This is true. As an example of that, if you would say to request a show, the guy who I mentioned who does all the liaison on that stuff, he would contact the archive to arrange for the program to be, to check if the program's available first. That program would then end up with our content delivery team if the program is available in a format that's either transferable, so it would take up machine time, or if it's already digitized, it would be on our digital program archive, and as you say, still needs to go through the process of content delivery. So yeah, it's a combination of cost and where the resources are at that point in time. If they're busy, fulfilling an order of a TV show for broadcast somewhere in the world, some far flung corner of the world, it's part of their regular daily business, then yeah, it will get pushed to the back of the queue, but they will fulfill it over time. It just might take a little time to get it, but you'll get it.
It'll be my luck that there's something I feel like I need to get. I'll go through it, get it, and then realize the network released it like 15 years ago.
That can happen. Yeah.
I mean, I will have done the look. I will have done the work. I would have asked people, but somehow it got through the cracks. $3,000 later, I could have picked it up at the network sale for £3.99, and I'm broke, and so that's how that works for me.
Yeah, this is true.
I wish that
say, actually it's quite common, not necessarily ITV, but I know on occasions where I've been involved in the ordering of material for documentaries or for viewing facilities where copies of shows have been transferred, and we're paid to get the thing transferred from film to digital, and then because it's then digital, somebody, like a network, for example, or somebody like that will come along, and because it's easily accessible, license it and release it. So you can find that quite often happens, But sorry, go on, Greg, as you were going to say.
No, you're absolutely right. And as you can see, God is coming through my window at the moment. It's angelic. Maybe it's Angela. And it could be all sorts of great things happening. So this is really working out well for me. I think the crowd will applaud the less they see of me. Army Game episodes were untitled. That may be the case on screen, and I don't know if this for all I know, because it says Facebook user, it could be Ian himself, it could be someone who's really in the know, but on the network DVDs, it will say that it'll have episode titles and some won't, and I feel like that there is a discrepancy, but someone who knows much better will know. But I just feel like that this is just how it is. I'm being consumed by Angel right now. It's very angelic. It's beautiful. Noel, I think this is a good question to ask because I can understand why people are confused by this, Tim. And it's like, why doesn't ITV broadcast the cleanup episodes of the professionals? Does network own 100% of the rights when they do a cleanup of a series?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, really, I suppose. Without going into too much of the nitty-gritty of the deals, but if network release something on DVD and they do a cleanup job on it, they will own their own master copies of it. So there are occasions when those master copies could be made available to ITV, but that's another commercial deal. So although ITV owns the rights in the programs, if they do a digital cleanup, then they're entitled to have their say over their material. Obviously, they still have to license it, but ultimately they've invested that money in doing that cleanup, so that is their copy. So we will use program copies that are available in the archive. It's not uncommon for something to be taken that has been cleaned up and a deal's done, and the cleaned up versions are used for. I'm not sure. I've not looked at the Prisoner on BritBox. That may be the original transfers and not the HD transfers, but that's an example. For instance, we could say, we'd like to use the HD transfers, and then a commercial deal would be done over the use of that work.
Right. I mean, I think that's the same thing that ended up happening with like Star Trek: The Next Generation, where to part of the remastering of that budget came in the idea of selling it for syndication. Yeah. But something like Python, for example, I mean, maybe it's available if someone wants to run it, but more than likely, I'm guessing that that's just particular for the Blu-ray sets. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I can understand the confusion over it, because you would think, well, this has already been restored in HD. Why is it not, in HD on ITV4 or the cleaned-up version or whatever? But yeah, that's so often the way. I suppose from ITV's perspective, they supply the program to the person who wants to license it. If they choose to clean it up and do whatever restoration work they want to do, that's their commercial decision to do that. That outside client would do that.
Then also, Jazz wonders, how do you personally feel about the BFI holding ITV material that should be returned to Leeds?
Personally, there's a sense of frustration at times because, when you're trying to research material, or maybe there's an occasion where we have some episodes of a show, and yet there are holes in those episodes with the BFI. It's frustrating not to be able to bring it all under one roof as such, but the relationship between ITV and the BFI is very, very strong and very frequent anyway. I mean, we're in constant contact with the BFI. So we know it's safe. I think the approach generally is it's safe in an archive. They're doing their own digitisation program at the moment. So if we needed it, we can access it. As a donor, we can access that sort of material. Obviously, there are fees involved, as there are with any archive work, but we can access it, and if there's a need for it. So it's safe. We know it's digitised, and that's pretty much it, really. That's the way we look at it. We'd know where to find it if we needed it.
Let's see here. I'm going to do a couple more. We have a lot more, but I don't want to keep you all night. And I'm really excited that so many people have been interested in this. I also feel like that what we could do, maybe take a couple more, and then if people want, we can do this another time if you're
great.
not bored to tears by this. And then Chuck, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that. Yeah, 26 box sets. Yeah, that makes sense. When you said seasons, I'm just like, tell me I'm not missing another 15,000 episodes that I don't want to collect. Let me see here. Using a process like, and this is also a good question. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here. A question like this, and I'm not trying to point anyone out particularly, because these are good questions to ask. This is what this is for. But Paul, I mean, there's a difference between archive and commercial holders in terms of what happens to material if it's going to get released. I mean, an archive remit often isn't one about restoration, but more about retention.
It is. That you've hit the nail on the head, really, Greg. It's a case of we keep it safe. It's there to be accessed. If somebody wanted to release the material and restore it, they'd be welcome to do that. But really, we just keep the original materials in as good a state as we can for posterity, really, so that it's there when somebody wants to use it and restore it. They can do that. And obviously, as technology comes on as well, we've seen how the vidfire improved everything. I mean, that technique really brought shows back to life. I mean, that was a really great work on the Doctor Who restoration team's side of that thing. But yeah, it's a case of really, we just, as you say, we retain the programs and they're there as and when they need to be worked on, really. I can't imagine us actually investing a budget in doing restoration specifically, not unless the materials were in danger.
Or if there's commercial viability with it. And
yeah, I mean, usually be a commercial partner that would do that.
Exactly, because I think, I mean, especially Network has been amazing in that, in terms of a lot of, some really good ITV stuff that they may do some work on that I'm sure the archives just want to make sure that this stuff is held safely, like you said. So
yeah, that's the priority.
There's a couple other questions, but I think we're going to leave it at that right now, because it's. I'll ask one more question, because this one, I think, when stuff gets released and there's a lot of cuts to it, I think people just want to at least make sure that the originals exist. Do you know, as far as Dempsey and Makepeace, I just heard recently how kind of cut up at least for series 1, the episodes were. Is this do uncut episodes exist? Do you know?
No, I couldn't answer that specifically. I would be inclined to say they will. We have, I mean, with a lot of shows, especially dramas, we have many, many versions of each episode of each show. I mean, Coronation Street is an example. We have multiple copies of each episode, apart from the missing one, of course. But yeah, I would imagine it's very difficult. It depends on. from an archive perspective, we'd always try to make sure they were supplied with the best copy we could source. We'd go through and look at all the assets related to that show. Mistakes happen. Of course, mistakes can happen where there may be the wrong not the wrong number, but maybe the wrong version on something. And unless you know that material intimately, it's very difficult to know where cuts have been made. But with versions, we would normally have a note on the program catalogue that would say this version, because if you create a new version of a show, you've got to raise a reason why it happens. So in the program catalogue, you would have to request. Try to give an example of how this would work. So with a new show, for instance, supposing a current episode of Coronation Street and an edit needed to be made to it, the production team of Coronation Street would have to contact the catalogue team and request a new production number. They'd have to give a valid reason why they need that new production number. So that would then be detailed on that recording. But of course, with inherited material from the amalgamation of various companies coming into ITV with LWT's library, for example, which was a good library, a well-kept library, but if the documentation's not on the tape or on the paperwork, those mistakes could happen. But I agree, it's really frustrating, especially when you're buying a set and it's not how you want it to be. But we try our best, but mistakes obviously can happen.
They do. It's just human nature, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot, like you said, there's more than one copy out there. So inevitably something will not work out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. It is frustrating. I totally feel the pain, especially when you spent out in a box set.
I do want to say, and if you have a couple minutes, I'm going to wrap up here real fast.
Yeah, sure.
That I was going to talk a little bit more about the missing episode situation for Doctor Who that a gentleman had posted on a Facebook page where he is talking about. This is what I ranted about last month, was somebody who really, in my humble opinion, should be leaving it to like the BBC to track down, reach out to restoration team. He was explaining that Iran, I think it is, has these Doctor Who episodes, but they're caught up in some political intrigue or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I really think that anyone who believes that, because he's saying that the episodes have been transferred, they're digital at the stations, whatever. I think anyone who believes that should listen to this broadcast, to be honest, because it's a great insight into how things just don't happen. People, if ITV or any station has material that they don't have the broadcast rights to and say it just languishes in their archive, I would assume that the station is not going to make a digital copy of it because it has no interest to them whatsoever.
It would be the lowest priority material. It really would. It wouldn't. I mean, in theory, this sort of material is usually returned to the copyright holder in the first place anyway.
Yeah.
If they'd got it, there's no way they'd be digitizing it. They'd be thinking about just returning it to the BBC or heaven forbid, destroying it and just, getting rid.
Absolutely.
I hope not, but it's unlikely.
Yeah, so I know that people are being very polite and whatnot. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be polite to someone who's putting this stuff out there, but also please just use common sense when you're reading this stuff, and don't get caught up into, oh, this person has an inside knowledge. They apparently tried to reach out to someone at the BBC, they were denied. Really, once again, when it comes to Doctor Who, you got to reach out to the Steve Roberts, Paul Vanisis, and whoever else. And it just don't get caught up in this. It's people who just want to get some sort of notoriety for whatever reason. Just be careful of it. Don't get your hopes up. We all love this stuff too much. It's easy to get our hopes up. Don't get carried away is all I'm saying about that.
Yeah, definitely. It's good advice.
Also, and Tim, you and I could talk so much more about all this missing episode stuff. But I just wanted to point out, since I was last on, we have lost some huge people, and I'm missing probably many of them, but Barry Cryer, Beryl Virtue, Henry Lincoln, and then I played at the top of the program, Anna Karen from On the Buses. To me, that just hits me the hardest because it's so tragic. Her passing in such a tragic way, where it's just it's just really sad. So I just really wanted to put that out there and just really pay respect to her. So, and all of them who have passed. Someone's like, I know a few examples of stations digitizing material they don't own, non-who though, possibly, but I really I stand behind what I said. I think that's very rare and probably not what is being represented. Also, real fast before we go, I brought this up. Kaleidoscope is very, very proud to have this available. This is the early, I don't have the stuff with me. Let me just look it up real fast so I can have it. All figured out. Now, Tim, have you seen these?
I've seen. There was one episode that was in circulation for many years. I've seen one other episode, I believe. I must admit, because I've been busy at ITV, I've not had an awful lot of hands-on dealings with the Kaleidoscope stuff. But it's good. I think it'll be, well, it's quite mind-blowing, to be honest, to think that this stuff's going to be coming out again.
It's the first series from the 1956 ITV series. Series 2 does not survive at all. It's a TV Brain exclusive until May 1st, when Amazon then takes it over. They're dispatching they're dispatching the DVDs now. I know it's a little bit slower because so many people have been so interested in this, but it also includes a small book about the ITV series written by Martin Gibbons, who of course is going to write this stuff. I mean, that's just what he does, because he's part of the Tony Hancock Appreciation Society. So honestly, folks, once again, you're into archive television. This is a beautiful, beautiful release. So please check it out, okay? Tim, thank you so very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I think everyone really got a lot out of this today. So I really appreciate all the time that you have given us.
Oh no, thanks for having me on, Greg. It's been lovely to chat about these things. Hopefully, demystify a little bit of some of the things that go on in the archive. We could do it again.
Yes, I hope we can. I hope you'd like to. For those of you who would like to follow what I do, you can email me feedback@fromthearchive.co.uk. I have a Twitter. I have Facebook. I have a blog that I haven't updated in nearly 2 years, so that'd be fun to read. And then I have a YouTube channel, which I've been currently putting up my Doctor Who on VHS, BBC video releases, which have been fun to do. So please check that out if you can. Tim, are you doing anything? Do you have anything going on that you want people to know about, or you just want to leave people with this? Perhaps I'm not quite sure.
I think that should be sufficient. Yeah, that's enough to give you sleepless nights.
I think this angelic, sunlight coming in on me is also a way. Before we go, just want to point out April 2nd, we're going to have Jazz on. We're going to talk about the Avengers, and I'm really excited for that also. And I'm very happy that he has agreed to come on. We are going to have him on a second time somewhere in this year to talk about all the ITC stuff that he's been writing about in his research and everything. So I guarantee this is going to be a lot of fun. March, currently, I don't have anything going on, but I'm going to sneak something in. So maybe, we'll figure something out, and maybe I'll bribe Tim to come back and bore another night of him or something. So, see, it's now getting nasty.
I'll never live that down. I'll never live it down.
I still stand behind the smelling of film. When you smell it, can you like see the frames, or is that just?
It's an acquired skill, but it's possible. Yeah, restore some of those compounded prints of Morecambe wires, peel them apart.
That's awesome. Okay, well, thank you all very much. We'll be back with something in March, but definitely April 2nd with Jazz. Tim, thank you so very much. It was Thanks, so much fun.
It's been good. I've enjoyed it. It's been lovely.
Take care, everybody.